Thank you. Hello, my name's Jamie, I'm an addict. I suppose I should start with an apology then, because the odd bad bit of language might slip out, because I'm quite passionate about some of this stuff. So I apologise if anyone takes offence, I'll try not to. A little bit nervous looking around the room. There's quite a bit of sobriety in here from what I can tell, and I find that slightly intimidating. It's also quite muggy still, and my hands are a bit hot and sweaty. I don't know if that's nerves or just the heat, I don't know. I'll start with a little bit of identification, starting with the childhood. I had what I describe as a fairly idyllic childhood in some respects. It was a bit Tom Sawyer-ish. I used to go out and sit on boats, go swimming out, take packed lunches out to other people's boats, played on the Isle of Wight a lot, and had a relatively normal childhood with a lot of love and care from my mum. Having said that, I've heard this a lot in the rooms as well, I felt like I was watching a television programme as a child. I didn't feel like I was part of life. I felt like it was just something that was being broadcast in front of me. And that, I don't know whether that was related to the condition I suffer with or not, but I've heard that shared quite a bit in the rooms. It really felt like I was just watching and not able to contribute. And I was a bit of a loner. I didn't have many friends, and I ended up playing a lot of the time with my brother's mates, who were 2 years younger than me. So that was sort of, I can't think of anything specific that happened in my childhood that meant I ended up becoming an addict. No major issues, there was no major traumas, certainly no abuse or anything that I can put down to that. And I've also, as I've grown older, I've considered myself quite blessed to not have suffered from what I describe as poor mental health. I've actually been quite a happy person. I wouldn't say all of the using years were happy years, but there was an element of partying at the beginning. So childhood was okay, really. Just didn't feel very connected to anything. I think that's probably the best way of putting it. I first took a drink, just do the maths quickly, in 1980, and I was 16, and I was working in a restaurant doing the washing up on Christmas Day. So Christmas Day 1980, as a 16-year-old, all the staff were being bought drinks by everybody having their Christmas dinner, and the landlord of the establishment said it'd be all right for me to have a drink as well. So, having watched a bit of television as a young lad, I remember the martini adverts, so I thought I'd order a martini. I didn't know what else to order, really. By the end of that Christmas service, I'd probably had 8 to 10 martinis and was really very pissed. As the first one came, I drank it, thought that was okay. Next one came, I drank it, and it just carried on. I don't know if I couldn't actually stop at that point, but that's what happened. That's the truth of the matter. I think had the service gone on even longer, I would have probably kept on saying yes, because I liked something that it did. I then tried to get home, didn't manage that particularly well. I remember I punched a tree and cut my knuckle. I have no idea why. I wasn't angry, I was just pissed. I got home and ruined what was supposed to be a late Christmas dinner with my family by throwing up everywhere. That was my first experience of alcohol. I didn't go out and get drunk the next day or anything like that, but I soon progressed into using cannabis regularly. Now, I became a huge cannabis fan. I suppose I was one of those guys. I was using a lot of cannabis daily, and I used to say things like, everybody should smoke, everyone should get stoned. Of course they should, it's the answer, everything makes sense, it's perfect. Everyone should get blazed, that's what we should do. And I really did hit the cannabis very hard, tried little bits of dealing, never very successfully, but yeah, always managed to get some. Now I spent the first part, I've basically had 3 careers over a very long addiction. And I've often worked. I've had some periods where I haven't been working, but I've held down 3 different sort of jobs. My first career was working as a nurse, which was great in some respects because I worked nights. I got quite a lot of time off, so I could party quite a lot. It didn't seem to matter if I got stoned before or after work, and it also meant I could nick Valium amps and temazepam. which also helped sort of with the cocktail of having a good time. That then, that was the first sort of number of years, and it was the early doors of using was just endless parties, you know, festivals, fun, Persian rugs, Pink Floyd, the whole, you know, just all of that stuff, really good fun. And I'm not sure when I crossed the line, but when I look back, there were certain things that happened. So I first used heroin early years of addiction, and I didn't get a habit or anything. I just dabbled occasionally, and then I left it for a while because circumstances changed. I first smoked crack cocaine in 1987, and this sounds like something out of a movie, and that's kind of what it felt like. I met a pimp from Toronto who had a diamond set in his tooth, big afro, white Jag, who turned me on to crack cocaine all night long. And I remember the very first time that I smoked crack, it was just all night. I have no idea how much in quantity it was, but it was a lot. This isn't euphoric recall, by the way. This is just me telling what happened. By sort of 6 o'clock in the morning, I went to the room in the flat where we were staying. It was on the 7th story in a flat in Vancouver, in a block of flats in Vancouver. And I thought the police were trying to get in. I'd already got sketchy. I thought the police were trying to climb in through the windows. I'm not quite sure how they would have got up there on the 7th floor, but I was having big black rushes coming through me, passing out, coming around, going, fucking. It was like on the edge of a heart attack. That's the first time I took it. And again, it's like when I first had a drink. I couldn't actually stop. This guy kept on giving it to me, so I kept on taking it. There was no control there at all. That was my first sort of 10 years of using, was parties, lots of fun, lots and lots of drugs. Never really had too many consequences because most of the time I was able to afford to pay for it because I'd been working, or I found a way of blagging it or whatever. I then sort of moved into, I had a hobby of music, and I got quite well read on certain things, and the college was starting a music course in Bournemouth, and they'd heard about this guy who was a bit geeky and was quite good at stuff, and they offered me a job of setting up the college course and getting the rooms all sorted, the recording studios and things, which I took, and then they offered me the job as manager to run it. So I then ended up going from being a nurse into managing a college centre. More money, excellent. As a result, I ended up taking even more drugs because there was more money available. Now, something I didn't sort of, there's a few things that I should mention really, that I never thought that I'd been in treatment, and I never thought I'd been to prison when I first got into recovery. Actually, I'd done both, but I just hadn't remembered it properly. So I got nicked for bringing Class A's down from London in a car, and ended up spending a little bit of time in Ringwood Scrubs. Luckily, it was case dismissed in the end, but there was a whole load of court case and all that stuff. So yes, I have been to prison, but only for a few days. I thought I'd never done treatment, and when I first came around and saw people in treatment, my honest belief was they're just having a holiday. I'm still working, and these guys are coming down here, getting all of their lithium and going down the beach or whatever it is. I just thought it was a party. I thought that's a really nice way to do recovery. I realise now that not everyone who goes into treatment actually has such a good time. But I did 2 weeks in Sedman Unit when I was manager at the college, because I was drinking so heavily. It became aware to some of the staff there, and I actually went to my line manager after a few colleagues had a word with me. And alcohol always featured, although I never thought I had a problem with alcohol. Alcohol was always there. I thought, I'm just a cannabis smoker early doors. Oh, I just dropped the odd pill. Oh, I just, whatever it is. But alcohol was always there as well. So during this period when I was working for the college, I ended up getting more into the heroin, and eventually got my first habit. And really then life became a bit difficult at times. Trying to hold down jobs became something that was very difficult. That period, that second job, was again about a 10-year period. So I had the first party period, then I had this period where I had a good job, and I thought, you know, a lot of life was great, but I was not functioning quite so well all of a sudden. I'm not sure when this line was crossed, but I definitely crossed the line at some point, because ultimately I ended up using against my will. There was nothing else I could do. I do know that. I then had a little period which I was speaking to Alan about just before the meeting, where I thought I was clean for a while because all I was doing was taking methadone and drinking 5 pints a night. I honestly believed I was clean. And I ended up starting to work, do some voluntary work for the local authority, Bournemouth Youth Service I work for, and they're now actually my employers. So this is the third phase. I had a period where I ended up not having any work at all, just a short period, a few years, 5 or 6 years, and then I started volunteering. I honestly believed I was clean at that point. My methadone had gone up to 120 mils, so 120 mil of methadone and 5 pints a night, and in my head I'm clean. During this sort of that whole first 20 years of using drugs on a daily basis, the only time I managed any sobriety was when I went to the Sedman unit for an alcohol problem, but I hadn't really told them that I was on methadone. But I did get a little bit of time where I tapered on the methadone, reduced, tapered at the end, and I managed about 9 months sobriety. And that was a horrible experience. I didn't identify myself anymore, didn't know who I was. Without the drugs inside me, I guess it was the restless, irritable, discontent, all that stuff. I just didn't recognise myself. And I remember a friend came round to the flat that I was in one day, said, "Fancy a pint?" I went, "Oh, thank fuck for that." Excuse my language, you see. Oh, sorry. I was so grateful for him saying those words, because it's all I wanted to do was get off my nut again. So I was back and off and running again. So I then picked up my juice. I remember I was quite often, if I was using enough heroin not to be taking the methadone, I'd be stockpiling tons of methadone as well, flogging that. Crazy consequences and things started to happen. So, and when I look back at some of my behaviours, that it's all too clear now that there is a level of insanity with it. I thought I was functioning because I had jobs and I was doing things, but actually having to buy urine off people is, I was spending good money on piss, because I needed to get my methadone. So, and they actually got to the point not that long ago when you couldn't even have you had to have the enzymes in your system, so you could, so you had to find somebody who was on methadone but staying clean, and then buy their wee. So the lengths I went to do that stuff was ridiculous, and all the crazy stuff about, finding some shoplifters, driving round, phoning up work, saying I'll be in. The car's got a flat or whatever, just black flannel. But my last period of work in the last part of my addiction, it became very, very painful for me. A lot of it, I became more and more isolated. The lengths I would go to get drugs became more and more desperate. And I just remember sort of things like sitting in my room. I'd lost my crack pipe, so I'd just be looking at a Red Bull can, shuffling around amongst bottles, methadone bottles and vodka bottles, and going, what the fuck am I doing? I was using against my will, absolutely using against my will. I didn't want to do it. That obsession in the morning, get up in the morning and go, I've got to get some money together, I've got to sort out a graft one way or another, because I've got to get to work, because if I don't earn money I'm absolutely buggered. So it just became a very, very pitiful place, very, very desperate. What happened with me, that sort of, I tried the rooms in the 90s and in the noughties, because I knew years ago that I had a problem. Like I said, I managed, in 35 years of putting chemicals in me every day, I managed 9 months without anything, and it was a painful place. So 35 years on a daily basis, I either had methadone, alcohol, cannabis, the list goes on. At the end of my using, I was running 4 habits: methadone, alcohol, drinking to black, crack and heroin. And my mum was terminally ill, and I knew when she told me that she was terminally ill that I'd going to have to be the one who was nursing her. She wanted to die at home. So just over a year ago, that's what I did. I nursed my mum through terminal cancer. Now that's not this morbid part of a share. This is actually, that was I honestly consider it a real privilege to have nursed the person who gave birth to me through death. I held her hand when she died and told her I love her. That's the last thing she'll have heard, because I know that's the last sentence that goes. And I considered that an absolute privilege to do. The one thing I wanted to do through that time, though, was actually be sober. And I couldn't do it. Couldn't do it. So when all of that stuff was dealt with, and I had disciplinaries at work and all sorts of just crap going on, really, really awful place. I'd lost everything, pretty much. I lost my driving licence. Apparently that meant I brought the council into disrepute. I remember I went to the driving awareness course and they all went round the room and they were all talking about the circumstances under which they got caught, and it came round to me, and it's because I'd started doing fellowship. I said I was a drug dependent alcoholic for 35 years and I deserved to be taken off the roads. I was a liability, absolute liability. The fact that I'd never been caught prior to that was a miracle. So after my mum died, I got 12-stepped by somebody into a meeting, and like I said, I tried the meetings in the 90s and noughties and not heard a thing. I'd been given a book, some literature, I don't even know which fellowship it's from, where it has a load of questions. I think it might be NA, you know, and this was in the 90s. Someone gave this piece of literature to me and said, look at those questions in there. And I remember reading it all, and there was about 40 questions, and I got 38 of them right. Yes, I have lied. Yes, you know, I've stolen off my parents. I've cheated. I've done all the stuff that it says in those questions. You know, I didn't know that was sort of like, you know, identifying, you know, the powerlessness that was going on in my life. But somebody else had seen that in me at that point. It still took me an awful long time to get round to this. So shortly after my mum died, somebody 12-stepped me and took me to that really mumsy meeting in Tuckton. Bit like the mumsy meeting in Ringwood, and not wishing to cause offence. And I heard something in those rooms for the first time ever that I'd never heard anywhere else. And thank you. And two things. There was someone in that room that day. It was their 10th birthday, sobriety birthday, and that to me was just massive. Somebody who did the main share going, I'm 10 years clean. For someone who'd used for 35 years, having heard someone who's got 10 years sobriety, that was a big message. And I think it's great that people have got long-term sobriety, and I think they should shout about it in meetings, because if you're a newcomer, well, for me anyway, that was a really powerful thing to hear. It's possible. Somebody's done it, you know, somebody who I identified with their story. The other thing I heard is you can have a life beyond your wildest dreams. Now that was a bit of a concept. It was, I could see these people were looking clean and seemed to be functioning well, and they didn't have that busy head stuff going on that I did. They had a little glow about them, and that was really, really attractive to me. So I guess I started listening, and I took on, we have lots of cliches in the fellowship, don't we? Loads of cliches, and I try and avoid them if I can. But when I hear them, I know that cliches are there because they're true. So when somebody, you know, this bit about you can have a life beyond your wildest dreams gets said sometimes, and you're going, yeah, okay. So those two things, long-term sobriety is promised, and you can have a life beyond your wildest dreams, were two things that resonated with me in that meeting at Tuckton. And I started going to meetings. I got a sponsor. I went through the steps. I'm going to touch very, very quickly, because I was given 5 minutes about 3 minutes ago. Very quickly on the God thing. I throughout my 35 years of addiction, I was a fervent atheist. Now, I still haven't got a deity in my life, but I have a higher power. I have a higher power of my understanding, and that's all I need. Yeah, it says it in the literature. You know, God of your understanding. So the God of my understanding is my God, my understanding. The God word, I think, can put a lot of new people off, personally. So I have a higher power in my life. I've got connected to that on a daily basis, and the last 14 months of my life have, without doubt, been the happiest days I've ever had. I've had the most incredible journey in terms of my sobriety. Things have happened incredibly quickly. It's a bit of a cliche. I have still got my job, which I'm so privileged to have. I love my job, I love my work. I'm very fortunate. I've got a beautiful partner, and I hadn't had a proper relationship for years and years and years. Certainly not one that I wasn't abusive in. I've got so much peace and serenity going on in my life, it's not true. I am happy on a daily basis, and I love what this stuff gives me, because it gives me so much more than just sobriety. It gives me the ability to grow on a daily basis. It gives me the ability to become a better person on a daily basis. The most attractive version of any of us is the best version of us. If I can grow to be the best version of me on a daily basis, then I'm doing something worthwhile. What this stuff gives me it's you know, what's the meaning of life? This stuff gives life meaning to me. That's what it does, and I'll leave it there.